Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised.
Wait, what are we talking about now?
I don't know. Let's just find out. No, we're talking about natural family planning was not the original design.
That's right. Yeah, that's
of
okay.
Marriage.
I was like, we just went through like 45 different options. Okay.
Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway.
All right, we are back with another NFP in real life episode here with Kathleen. I'm
How's
Ellen.
it going? That's right. We're all here.
We're all here. So
and
are
it's
all
summer.
of our kids.
Yeah, it's summer over here.
To this
So
recording.
before we even hit record, we've been interrupted about 600 times. So forgive us if that happens again.
Yeah, hopefully. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the fact that NFP was not a part of the original design. NFP isn't, it was something that came, a gift that God has given us, a tool to use to solve a modern problem that we have.
Yeah.
So let's do what Jesus does and go back to the beginning.
There we go.
So if we go back to the beginning, and of course, I think there's a lot of interpretations of Genesis and Adam and Eve and just like, oh, are these actually these two people or whatever. But for the sense of this, we're just going to be talking about Adam and Eve as if they are two regular old people.
Yep.
The first two people, right? At that time, there was absolutely no reason to need to limit fertility. There was no sin at the beginning of time. So there was perfect unity of persons. Now, there was no conception at the beginning. And I always find that kind of interesting that the conception didn't happen until after the fall. I don't know what that means, but I just find that interesting.
I would agree with you.
I don't know if that was just a sake of time or I don't know. I just find that really interesting that a child didn't come. But it was part of God's plan that an immaculately conceived virginal woman would conceive and bear the Son of God.
Right.
And so maybe it just wasn't in God's plan yet to have an immaculately conceived human because there was no need for an immaculately conceived human. He didn't have a need for that quite yet.
Right. Yeah.
We needed to get through a lot more salvation history. He wasn't ready for Christ to come. So I mean, I think we chalk that up to just, it wasn't a part of God's plan, yet to have an immaculately conceived human. And you know what? I think we should also preface this again, that like Kathleen and I are not biblical scholars.
No,
we are fallible human beings.
This is purely like just speculation and a conversation. This is like, hey, let's think about this for a second and bounce ideas off of each other. This isn't anything written in stone.
Exactly. Okay. So we were at the beginning. Now we have the fall. Now we have the conception of humans. We have the call to be fertile and multiply again, right? So God said, be fertile and multiply before the fall. He said it again after. So this is an important call from God, is this call of fertility. And that call can be seen in both a physical, manifestation of physical children, infertility, but then it also can be seen in, being fertile in your relations with other humans and, and multiplying God's children through conversion, maybe not your own physical children, but multiplying God's children, and bringing more people into the church. So, that call to be fertile and multiply means a lot of things.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's this call to be fertile and multiply. I think people did be fertile and multiply because then we got a bunch of people on the earth, right? And then things happen because we are fallen human beings. Sin is rampant in the world. And there are reasons that couples are trying to avoid pregnancy for one reason or other. And a lot of times we think about, oh, okay, this is just a modern problem.
Yeah.
But it's not. The knowledge of the fertility cycle is ages old.
Yeah.
And so it's just that the more modern methods of fertility awareness and the evidence-based research and the specific like rules and these different methods, those are more modern. But the general knowledge of the fact that fertility happens maybe 2-ish weeks after the period starts, that knowledge was around. People knew that.
Yep. Yeah.
And so, I don't know where I'm going with this, Kathleen. Maybe you should take over.
Well, I'm like making notes on thoughts as you're talking. And the one thing that first strikes me is that, okay, yeah. So in Eden, right, we just had perfect communion with God. Like we had perfect understanding of his will for us, right? Like there was no disconnect. Cue the fall, and now all of a sudden, right, like we've separated ourselves. We lost that communion. We lost that perfect knowledge of his will. So the fact that, like, I don't know, like the realization that God gifted us something to basically deal with the result of our own sin is something so interesting to me that, you know, like we messed up, right? And, you know, so sinned against God to the point that he casts us out, right? Like there's no choice. He just has to cast us out because we have broken that communion. He did not break that communion, but he says, but take this with you, right? Like, and, you know, it's going to take a really long time for us to develop the means of really understanding our body, you know, from the moment of the fall.
Right.
But still that, you know, he gives us gifts so generously, right? Like if someone, I mean, you like imagine yourself as God and someone just like completely doing you wrong, if you will, right? Like just completely separating themselves from the goodness of your relationship. You're not going to want to like give them things to help them out. You're not going to want to like, right. And God is so generous that he just like, hey, you're going to need this now because you did this. And so take it. It's just like, I don't know, just such a beautiful testament to like who God is and what he does. But, the other thing that I'm thinking about is that, okay, so in Eden, we lived basically in a constant state of prayer, right? Like being in
perfect communion.
It's just a constant state of prayer, right? So that's what we, when we, you know, make time to pray during the day, like that's what we're doing, is looking to get back to that communion with God, that conversation with God, like looking to be with him. And that in a way, not in a way, you know, he has gifted us NFP as a way to sort of, you know, it's not a requirement, right? Like
no, absolutely not. You don't need, you don't need to
have
use
to practice it. Yeah. But like in our fallen human state, you know, a lot of people find it really, really helpful. But it also requires a drawing back to God in order to really practice it. Like if you are not incorporating prayer in your practice of NFP, it's going to be really, 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 really hard. Yeah. And it's going to probably result in a lot of resentment between you and your spouse. There can be a lot of misunderstanding. You know, I think those are the times when there's a disconnect between spouses on it, and then a disconnect between between, your practice of NFP and God, right? I mean, that's essentially what it is. It's fertility awareness along with discernment, right? Like, it's not just fertility awareness. That's like the key distinction between the two. So it just requires this like drawing us back to Eden, this like drawing us back to God to try and get that perfect communion again, that understanding of his will, right? Like, we're not going to be there.
What you're saying right now is amazing. Like this, the perfect communion, what was popping into my head is when we're really tracking our cycle, we are getting more into communion with our own body, which is part of that building back in that communion with God, because our body tells God's story. That's the name of a Christopher S. book. But I love it.
Out.
But our body and God lives within us, right? So in some sort of sense, right? We are God in a way,
right.
That with a grain of salt, right? Like
we are
trying
not
to be
God,
radical here. I'm right, but God within us, the Spirit within us, as we are getting into greater communion with ourselves, we are naturally getting into greater communion with God. But I love what you're saying about really truly practicing NFP requires us to go back to Eden, to try to build back up that communion with God. Because I can guarantee you, Adam and Eve did not use NFP.
No, I can guarantee you they also did not.
Guarantee you that. Okay.
That might be one thing that's written in stone that we say here.
Yeah, right. We know that's true.
Man.
They had no reason to, because they were in perfect communion. Their erotic desire for each other was perfectly in line with their like agape love for each other, right? Like everything before the fall was perfectly connected and united. And then the fall happens and there's this huge rupture between God and his people. And that because God is within us, because we are made in the image and likeness of God, that rupture continues to ourselves, to our personhood. There's then this rupture between our understanding of ourselves and, and who we are, and our understanding of our bodies, and the understanding of the connection that we have between body and spirit, that we are a soul body being. That's why we have all these heresies of like Manichaeism and like these dualistic, like, spirit good, body bad, things. Like, it's because we have this rupture in our understanding of the communion that we have within ourselves. And so that communion of body and soul that we have within ourselves, that's an image of God that helps us to better understand the communion that God has in the Trinity. Yeah. And so NFP helps us to discover that even more, because we are reintegrating ourselves with our own bodies. We're re-understanding the natural rhythms of our body, which in itself can become a prayer. So you charting, even though you hate it, that's a prayer.
Yeah. And I think, this whole idea that God really gifted us this tool that he knew we would struggle with, that he knew would be difficult for us. And like, I don't think that wasn't accidental, like that was to draw us back and to help us to realize that, hey, I can't really do this without looking to unite my will to yours. Right. Like that's kind of the whole draw. Like, he knew that he would be an essential required part of this if it was going to be done. I don't even want to say well, but it's the whole part of it.
Okay. I think this would be a really good time to talk about Magic Mind.
I agree. Let's talk about that.
Okay. So Magic Mind is sponsor of this week's episode. And actually this is going to be really fun. We're going to journey through the next 3 episodes telling you a little bit about our experience with Magic Mind. So like definitely stay tuned. So what Magic Mind is, it's like this little drink. I think it's like 2 ounces. And it helps with like focus and energy for your day. It has like matcha. It's got
ashwagandha, right? Yeah.
Lion's mane mushrooms. I've heard a lot about
I've heard a lot. Oh my gosh. I've heard so much about so many different mushrooms and lion's
mane.
My
mother is obsessed with lion's mane mushrooms.
See, I actually don't like mushrooms, but I've heard that when it's in stuff like this, you really don't taste it.
Yes. Okay. So here's the thing is I've gotten to try it. Kathleen hasn't gotten to try it.
I have not yet. Mine's on the way and I'm super excited.
Yeah.
I need that focus.
So I've tried a couple of them and then I have a bigger pack. Actually, it's supposed to be delivered today when we're recording this. So I have a bigger pack coming. So I'm going to try it for like more days in a row. So I've tried like 3 of them and honestly, it was pretty cool. So I refrigerated them. I think that's a big help.
Pro tip.
Pro tip. It's got some honey in it to like sweeten it up a little bit. But it was like a little sharp. But I honestly, the days that I drank it, like I am writing essays right now for my master's degree.
Yeah.
And that's like a really hard thing to do as a mom.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I can imagine.
Staying focused and like trying to, dig through deep theological papers.
I struggled to write essays when I was just in college with no children, nothing to do. I can't imagine having to do it right now. That'd be crazy.
But also just like, I don't know, keeping things organized is really tough when you have like little kids.
Yeah.
Keeping schedules organized, making sure that like you don't pack peanuts in the kids' lunch that goes to the school that's peanut free. And
yes. Yeah. Like, all the little things. There's like
all
1,000
of those
little
tiny
details.
things, keeping the house running. Like, I mean, Kathleen, you've been talking about how in postpartum, you've just been feeling like you've been forgetting everything all the time.
I can remember nothing.
But I'm honestly really excited for you to try it because
I am really too, honestly.
I think it's going to help you like just zone in. They talk about like getting in kind of like a zone, working or having Magic Mind and like just really like focusing your brain.
That's what I need.
Yeah. So anyway, Magic Mind.
I'm excited to see how it works. Yeah. So stay tuned, everyone.
Yeah. Stay tuned. So if you guys also want to try Magic Mind, you can go to magicmind.co/intimacy. So that's magicmind.co/intimacy, INTIMACY. That link's going to be in the show notes. And if you use the code intimacy20, you can actually get 40% off. I know that like shock,
Really?
You're like 20, but yeah. So you get 20% off of your purchase, but then if you do a subscription, you get an additional 20% off.
Oh.
And so it's like becomes 40% off, which is a huge discount. So
yeah.
Link to that's going to be in the show notes. Highly suggest you guys check it out. Let's keep talking about, I think you were going to say something, right?
Yeah. I think of those moments that have been really like sort of like the trust falls into God's arms, right? Like in our practice of NFP, like, hey, do I really want to be pregnant right now? I really don't. But does my marriage need this right now? Like, yeah, it does. Mm-hmm. Right. And so how comforting it is for me in those moments to be able to say, Lord God, I know that I don't have control over this. And my OB, I love her so much. She's a Catholic NAPRO doctor. She's super devout, but she always says to me, she says, you can provide an egg and your husband can provide a sperm, but only God can make a baby. And I think about that so much in those times where it's like, my marriage needs this, but I don't want to be pregnant. And you literally can just take that and place it in God's hands and the comfort of that to be like, make a baby if it's your will and let my will align to yours. Yeah. And if it's not, then so be it. Like that's just it. And I don't know. I think of how how grateful I am for that perspective, for NFP, solely for that perspective, and not just like a secular fertility awareness, because in a secular fertility awareness, it's all on you. You have to make every single little decision. You have to be willing to accept the consequence, which, I mean, you still have to be willing to accept the consequences of your actions, right? In NFP, but it's like, but you don't have that sense of being able to place this into the arms of an omniscient, God who ultimately has control over it all. The control is all in you think the control is all in your hands, and how much pressure that would be to practice that way. I mean, I think about this in so many aspects of the faith, like how amazing it is that it's just not all on us, right? Like that we have the ability to place struggles and hardships and anything into the arms of God is like, it's such a gift.
And I think this is one of the issues that we have currently with just in general. I don't think everybody thinks this way, but in general, our outlook on NFP really comes from a more secular perspective. We're thinking about natural family planning as the Catholic alternative to birth control.
Yeah.
We're not thinking about it as a reintegration of communion with God. I mean, in all honesty, I had never thought about that sentence prior to us chatting this morning. So this is new for me, everybody.
Yeah.
I think in a sense I had kind of thought about that, but really realizing that and I've said this before, sometimes we do this with like Catholic things. We'll say a sentence that we don't ever actually take the chance to really learn what it means. Like, what the heck does it mean to be made in the image and likeness of God?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. If you dive into that, it will absolutely blow your mind.
Yeah.
But we say it like it's nothing all the time, right? And I think I've been doing that with saying that natural family planning allows us to work within the God-given design of our bodies. That sentence has a ton of weight to it, a ton of just realization about our bodies and our personhood and God and the Trinity, and like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's a weighty sentence right there.
Yeah.
So something else that I think we should kind of touch on is I think a lot of the difficulties of NFP also come from sin, which we already said that, but but in a more like practical sense, a lot of times when we have trouble with NFP, it's because of something wrong with our cycle. Because our cycle, we're getting this like extra long chunk of abstinence. Our signs are confusing to read. I mean, there are definitely like struggles with NFP that can be easily mediated with, meeting with an instructor or getting a more formal class, or, just making sure that you're actually following the rules correctly. Like, there are definitely things that can be mediated, but I think we also need to recognize that there are problems with NFP. NFP doesn't actually work for certain bodies.
Yeah.
And that's part of the design. That's what I'm going to throw out here. Okay.
Whoa.
Right? Whoa.
Yeah.
Because, well, that's not part of the design, the original design. I'm saying that is part of what God has gifted us in natural family planning, because the cycle issues that we have, if we do a root cause analysis on the cycle issues that we have, we can take it all back to the fall. Okay. Nutrition. The fact that our nutrition isn't clean, we can take that all back to the fall.
Yeah.
The fact that we have all these endocrine disruptors in just household objects, we can take that all back to the fall. I'm not saying like this takes many, many steps, and I don't think we have time in this episode to like go through the steps that it would take you to get to seeing like where it's coming from in the fall. But like, let's take nutrition, because that's actually really fundamental to the story of the fall, right?
Yeah.
Nutrition is actually,
it's the whole story.
It's the whole story. But like, we have these like processed things that actually have like chemicals that we should not be ingesting. And where is that coming from? It's coming from companies wanting to make cheaper products and be able to make more money on them. And so it's coming from a lack of research into certain things, because again, companies maybe don't want to spend the money to do that. It's coming from a need to make products as shelf stable as possible. I'm putting this like all back on money. Not that money is a sin,
right?
There's not a sin to having money or to making money. There's no sin there. But, and this is biblical, right? Having money, like your concupiscence is at risk.
Yeah. There's a whole mentality that goes along. I mean, because money has the potential to cause greed, and greed, kind of has all of these other.
So exactly. Yeah. Thank you for bringing greed in. I think that's what I was trying to get to, is that, all of those kind of examples that I pulled out with nutrition, that's coming from greed.
Right.
And so, and greed, we know greed's a sin, right?
Yeah.
And we can take every single sin, we can point that right back to original sin. It's a stemming of that original sin in some way. And so nutrition affects our cycles. It affects our bodies. Right. And so that's how we can like understand in some sense that any of these cycle issues that we're having are coming from the fall. And so the fact that NFP isn't this perfect science of 100% accuracy, that's in essence part of our history of humans, in that we are fallen humans. And so God gives us this tool to help us get more in touch with our bodies, to get, really build in greater communion with him, and then greater communion with our spouse too, because we're talking about our fertility. We're talking about the cycle. We're talking about our plans for the future. We're talking about future children. But at the same time, we have to give our lives to God.
Yeah.
If we're going to follow him, we have to give everything to him.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't mean we have to just throw the chart out and never chart again.
Right.
But that means that we need to recognize it's not a perfect science, and that is good that it's not a perfect science.
Yeah. Yeah. And that also, again, like on a very regular basis, on a monthly, give or take, basis, like we need to be bringing this question of children and family life, to God. Like and if we're not, like I said, if we're not doing it that way, which like, I'm raising my hand here, like I have absolutely failed to do it this way many, 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 many times.
Yep.
I'm not like, on my high horse here. I'm just
right.
I'm right down here along with everybody else. But if
do as we say, not as we do.
Exactly. Well, and I mean, and it has been, NFP has been the hardest part of our marriage. I'll fully admit that. In fact, I have admitted that. I mean, we went and talked to a bunch of high schoolers at a retreat on a vocations retreat. We were kind of like the married talk, and someone literally asked us, what's been the hardest part of marriage for you? And that's what we said. It's NFP. And, if we're not bringing this question of our family size and, everything to God to try and know his will for us, because there are times where I think God's going to say, he will say to us, hey, not right now. Like, you've got enough on your plate, and your current children need your focus. more than you need to add another right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he absolutely says that to us at times, you know? So I guess in bringing it to him, like it's such a necessary thing. And if we don't do that, it's going to be a really, really hard practice for us, because it just makes it all on us. Like it's all up to us, and it's not. Like that's kind of the, you know, the biggest thing about it. And I think it's also really important to sort of address, and I mean, we're probably coming up on time here, but to address that, we really need to fight the temptation and the tendency to be afraid of what God might be asking us.
Yes.
You know, because I think there's so many
daily
times,
struggle.
It's a daily struggle. And I think that there's so many times that we are afraid to bring this to prayer, thinking that he's going to ask us to basically have another one, right? Or to like entrust us with another soul. And we just don't feel up to it. And so we just avoid taking it to prayer, when, you know, in reality, he's only going to do what he's only going to ask us to do what's best for us, number one.
Right.
And then also remembering that he's going to equip us with whatever we need to take on what he's asking us. So we might feel like we're totally not ready and we're totally unprepared, and like, there's no way I could do it right now. And maybe he's not going to ask you to do it right now, but if he is, trusting that he's going to give you the tools and the grace to be able to add that to your plate, to take it on.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so that's it.
I love that. Yeah. Just recognizing that, I mean, our whole lives are supposed to be given over to God. And when we, you know, I think this was something that I struggled with a lot when I was kind of like reverting to the faith, like,
yeah.
in college. And it was like, oh, you're supposed to give everything to God. And I was like, if I give everything to God, then I'm not going to have anything. Yeah. And that's not the case. We are supposed to give it all to God, offer it all to God. And he is going to take away the things that are not good for us. And then he's going to give us things that are good for us. And so when we give our fertility over to God, that doesn't mean he's just going to turn it right back around and hand us a baby.
Right.
It might, because that's probably what's best for you. But it also might not, because again, he's going to do what is best for us.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think this is a great place to end. Just going to end on a pretty hot topic here.
Yeah.
If you want to have full control over whether or not you have a baby, don't have sex. Ever.
Boom. That's the only way to do it.
That's the only way to do it. Well, I mean, it's kind of not though, because Mary had a baby, but
touche. I think she'll be the one and only though.
But I'm fairly certain none of you guys were immaculately conceived either. So
consider yourself safe from that.
Yeah. You're really safe from that. Yeah. But truly, if we actually do want to have control, that's the only way to have true control.
Yeah. You're right. And I don't think that's what God's calling most of.
No,
if you're married anyway.
That's
not what he's calling.
That's a really, really good point to say. That is not what God is calling most marriages to. He created sex, and it is a very, very good thing. And the equal primacy of procreation and unity is fundamental to the act. And it is very important for your marriage. Yeah. And so,
was it Saint Therese's parents, Louis and Zélie Martin, wanted to have a Josephite marriage? Do you know this?
I didn't know that.
They wanted to have a Josephite no sex marriage, and they brought it to their priest, and their priest was like, "You can't do that. That's not what this is about." So they begrudgingly didn't.
That's fabulous.
But then they went on to have like 3 saints, right? Like,
I
mean, could you imagine?
All of their children joined the convent. Like, talk about a holy family,
right? Exactly.
Yeah. All right. That's everybody's homework: is go read Story of a Soul.
Yeah,
because it will totally change your life in how you approach your family life. And like,
I actually have not read it.
Oh,
which is
totally
amazing that I haven't, but
reading. I just read it. I just read it for the first time. It's really good.
Yeah, I do need to read it.
But it's just, I mean, it just put me on fire for wanting to have a very Catholic home, because
I love that
Therese had a very Catholic upbringing, and that's so evident in Story of a Soul. But anyway, there's your homework, everybody. Go read the Story of a Soul.
No big deal.
It's very accessible because Saint Therese is she's young when she writes it. She is not, and this is Saint Therese's whole thing. She's not this like lofty, Saint Thomas Aquinas. She is the little flower. She is
a doctor of the church.
She's a doctor of the church, and she is a child who is writing this. She's Saint Therese of the Child Jesus. Like, this is really, really important to her, that she is like young and a young soul. So the book is extremely accessible.
I love it.
All right, on that. All right, everybody, if you're not following us on Instagram, be sure to follow us at Charting Toward Intimacy. Check out the show notes for links on how to get in contact with us. And if you are listening to this podcast and you are listening on Apple Podcasts, please give us a rating or a review. That really helps us to spread the word about the podcast. 100%. All right. Until next time, everybody.
See you guys.